40 here, we talked about the parable of the two sons. The one son said that, no, I'm not going to go out and work in the vineyard, but later repented to come back. Second son said, yeah, Dad, I'll go out there and I'll work in the vineyard. And he just went off and did whatever he wanted, didn't go out. What kind of, looking at us, I know that was specifically talking about the Pharisees and the Jewish leadership and the Sanhedrin and stuff, comparing themselves with those who were publicans and harlots and whoever else. They kind of looking down on them and puffing themselves up. But what can we learn as Christians from that parable? Because as we go through here, the parables just weren't out there for that reason. We ought to be able to make some personal or application today. It needs to be applicable today as well. Gail?
The thing that is apparent to us should be that they represent a person who rejects the Word of God and then later repents and turns back to Him. And it's a lesson for each and every one. We know people who have rejected the Word of God, and then some years later, they decided that there is something to the Word that we're missing, so they decide to investigate it a little further, and then finally they do obey the gospel. It's a wonderful scene to think of, and that's represented here by the one son who rejected that word at first, rejected the father's command, and then later returned to him.
Yes, and we need to, again, when we take a look at the overall, and that is true, can we be the second son, though?
Who has left the Lord. They've been a part of the family of God for years, and then left the Lord, as far as we know, to never return.
And so that lesson is just as applicable to us. And I'm even thinking, sometimes we think that we're holier than other people, and we puff ourselves up when we may even be worse than who we're kind of deriding. So we need to take those lessons to ourselves as well. Then we go and we take a look at the vineyard with the husbandman and sending his son. Why do you think that parable was given? And remember, Christ is within a day of dying. Why do you think that this particular parable was given? Ann?
It applies so much to us. It applies to us so much, and now I forgot what I was going to say. What did you just ask?
I asked, why do you think Christ did this parable?
Well, he knows, but his main mission was to come to this earth, was to seek and save the lost. And that's what this is. Some seek it and lose it for good. Some seek it and have it till eternity has come. And we need to realize that none of us are so sure, sitting right here in this room, that we're all going to go to heaven. We may do something to cause us to go away from God's word, which I feel sorry for anyone who does, but I've seen it happen, and so, like Gail said, we both have.
And
But it-
we see it in the New Testament too,
Yeah.
where people have fallen away. I think John's got a comment, and then Andrew. I'm gonna make you, well, go ahead, get Andrew first. That'll be easier on you. I know you're getting older.
So I think with this parable, more so than some, it's not just parable, it's prophecy. He's talking about events that are just going to happen and are pretty clearly laid out in his story. The killing of the master's son by the hands of the people who should have been working, who should have been serving the master, and then the appeal to go out and then get other followers and to bring more into the vineyard. It's going to prep people who see the upcoming events, and it's going to be fresh in their minds when they see this and then realize the start of the new kingdom.
Okay, let's get John.
I'm gonna try something, Chuck. Hey, Chuck, I'm helping you out, man. Oh, I'll use this back here. You know, one of the points that you've made this last few weeks is, you know, to look at the characters, and he wants the people to see themselves in the parable. And here with this one, he gets them to give the right answer when they say, he will destroy those men. And for anybody there who's honest, for anyone there who's, you know, as they reflect back on this and they become like that second son in the earlier parable, they're going to remember, we condemned ourselves out of our own mouths. We said this is what the master will do to these wicked men. If we're wicked, if we do what this parable says, if we kill the son, then you get to what hope, you know, what shall we do? And he gets them to give the answer out of their own mouth.
Looking at both your and Andrew's comments, what about the disciples? What about the apostles that were there? Because they were there. Do you think maybe this parable was also for their benefit?
Yes.
Just sit there.
At least for their instruction to others. I'm sorry. At least for their use in teaching others. Certainly, as it turned out with Judas Iscariot, it applied to him specifically.
So do you think that the disciples still understood what was going to happen?
Oh, no.
No. So here, Jesus again lays it out. And I think it, right now, as Andrew says, I really think it went over all these folks' heads. Although it does say that the Pharisees thought that he said it, they thought he was talking about them. I don't think that they were sure, but I think they had a good idea, but and they went away. But still, I think it was after the death and after these things that, you know, their eyes are being opened up after that. They'll maybe come back and hear these things. Jim?
Yeah, in a sense, this wedding feast is still going on. The world is invited. That's been going on for 2,000 years or so. And people now is the same way as then. Their attitude's wrong. They won't come and be a part of the bride. Down in verse 14, many are called, but few are chosen. That's the saddest tragedy in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so with that review, and let's do the questions then on the wedding garment. What is the kingdom like? Is the first question. What is the kingdom like? A wedding feast. Correct. And let's silence this. How did the people initially respond to the invitation? The first people who were invited, how did they respond?
They refused to come.
Yeah, they just refused to come.
Turned it down.
And what happened to the second set of servants then that were sent out to invite the guests to the wedding?
Social line where you might be. to have a big wedding feast like this is, he knew some pretty important people. Well, some of them, got invited, but they didn't want to come.
Right.
And
So the first invite, they just didn't come. So the second time when the second remnant went to invite, I believe it's probably the same people.
it may be. But some of
What
them,
happened to those servants?
some of them had farms to go take care of, and some of them had wives to take care of. They
What-
found any excuse they could get.
Okay,
Yes.
so what happened to the remnant? They were beyond excuses at that time. So what did they do? Verse 6. It says, the remnant took his servants and entreated them spitefully and slew them. So that's a little bit more disasterly than saying, we're not going to come. Because of the rejection of some, who would be invited then to the wedding? Since that the initial people that were originally invited wouldn't come, who would be invited?
Any and everyone.
Yeah, go out to the highways, get the good and the bad. He didn't say ugly, but I'm sure the ugly was in there somewhere. But to get them and let them know that the wedding was furnished. You got food? I'm going. What was expected of the guests? To have their wedding garment, right? To be properly dressed. And when you went to a Halloween party, what would be expected? You should wear a costume. You should. A lot of people don't, but you should. Or if you're going to a fancy ball, if I was to go to the Air Force ball and I went in my jeans and t-shirt, they would probably throw me out. If I didn't have my dress mess on, then yeah, that would not be good. There was an expected way to dress. What is meant that many are called but few are chosen? What does that mean?
Well, God offers everybody salvation. He's given them the word, but a lot of them don't adhere to his. Again, they're offered the call. Whether you answer it and live to abide by the standards, put on the wedding garment, do what is told of you, they won't be chosen. There'll be those few that agree to live by that standard.
So basically that wedding garment means that you've put on Christ. I've been living the commandments. I've been doing the things that I've been following Christ and the things that I need to do so that my garments aren't soiled. My garments hasn't been, thrown away. So you're chosen from that. Aren't we chosen from the deeds that we do? And I take a look at 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 10. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive the things done in his body according to that he has done, whether it be good or bad. So we're all invited to this feast.
When I use the word many, I'm not necessarily including everyone, but this word, many here, does include all. All are invited to come to this feast. Not just a few, but all of them.
Now, with the chosen, it's not meaning that Christ is going to say, Gail, I'm going to choose you to be a Christian and you're okay. It's up to you to come to have that gown on. It's not up to the master to do that. So again, it's something that we have to do. The invite is there. We're all invited to come, but will we be properly dressed? And then the other thing that I had mentioned was in Matthew 25, verses 32 through 34, and also 41, going before judgment and basically the separation of the sheep from the goats. And so, any other comments that we have before we move on to lesson 41? Okay, if somebody would then either read the Matthew, Mark, or Luke account. Be turning there and raise your hand, and Chuck will come with the microphone for you to read. Anybody? Okay, John or Jennifer, go ahead.
Then the Pharisees went and plotted how they might entangle him in his talks, and they sent to him their disciples with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of God in truth, nor do you care about anyone, for you do not regard the person of men. Tell us, therefore, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But Jesus perceived their wickedness and said, Why do you test me, you hypocrites? Show me the tax money. So they brought him a denarius, and he said to them, Whose image and inscription is that? They said to him, Caesar's. And he said to them, Render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. When they had heard these words, they marveled, and left him and went their way.
Okay, so here we have this with the tribute money. And what was the aim of the Pharisees here? To do what? Okay, to do a gotcha? Okay, yeah. So what do you think would have happened then if Jesus had said, nah, you don't need to give the Roman government nothing?
You're not adhering to his rule, and he's our king.
Yeah. You're inside lawlessness and trying to overthrow Rome. So he didn't say that. Nor did he say, basically answer the question right now and say, yeah, you need to pay Rome tribute money. He didn't say that. What did he do instead? And so how did he do that? Yeah, he asked him to do what?
Look at the coin.
Yeah, bring me a denarius or a penny, and whose face is on that?
Caesar.
Yeah. So he answers the question then the right way. And what are they supposed to do? Render to Caesar what Caesar's, and to God what is God. Is that relevant to us today? Very much so. And so we don't know what all is going to happen in the next 4 years, but the fact of the matter is we're still under the government. And we need to give the government its due, and we need to give God his due. So when the two is in conflict, which do we choose? Audra?
Well, I think it's amazing how Jesus knows their, I guess it's really not that amazing in a way because he knows us all, but he knew their hypocrisy. Mm-hmm. He knew what they were trying to do, and yet he was able to answer in such a way that he answered something to such to the degree that they had no fault with him, and yet they wanted to entrap him. That was their
Right.
purpose.
So, what can we learn from the answer that Christ gave? Okay, we have responsibilities, but at the beginning, when he said, "Go bring me a coin," what did these people need to see? And we looked at the parables too. What is it that Christ did with the Pharisees in those accounts? Did he just come out and give them a direct answer?
No?
No.
They had to think about it.
They had to think about it, but when people ask us questions about the Lord's church, or ask us something religiously, what we think, do we just tell them? Or do we say, well, what does Matthew say? When someone wants to talk about divorce and remarriage, do we not go back and say, well, what does Matthew 19 say? Or what does this say over here about that? I mean, there are so many people out there wanting to entrap us. And sometimes we want to give an answer, even though it's the wrong answer, or maybe we don't know what the answer is, instead of going to the book and saying, what did this say here? John?
I was just going to say, like you just pointed out, he made them see it. And it's like they need to see it. And when they see it, it becomes that much more condemning when, here in just a little bit, when he's on trial, they're going to lie and say, well, he said we don't have to pay taxes. And it's like, no. It's like he makes them see it, and he says, you render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. And they, just like that previous parable, he makes them answer the question, and that's good Bible study.
Jim?
Yeah, we need to learn that follow Jesus. He paid his taxes, and he told the politicians what was right. And like John, we need to be like Jesus and John. Not only pay our taxes, but tell them politicians when things are not lawful. See, it cost Jesus and John their lives, but they went to a better place. And so we need to have enough faith to stand up to them and tell the truth, where it's our brothers, politicians, or whoever it is that's a sinner. We need that kind of faith and love to be able to show the truth that they might be saved.
Did anyone else have their hand up? So here we find that, again, it's much easier if somebody can read it for themselves and come to that understanding of what the scripture has to say. Because a lot of times, maybe the way that we come across, especially if we're talking to family members who aren't Christians, we love them so much and we want them to understand, but they have to understand it themselves, and they have to come to that understanding themselves. It's like we'd like to slap them and, maybe slap some of it into them, but that's not the way it happens. They have to come to the realization, and we have to come to the realization in things ourselves, especially as we go through our life. There's times that as a Christian, people want to make excuses for their sin or things of not necessarily committing sin, but not even doing right, which is also sinful. There are things that we should be doing that if we don't do, that's wrong, as well as if we do something that is, quote unquote, that we see is against the commandment. So let's take a look at the questions here then.
Hey, Joe,
Yes.
I find it interesting in Matthew's account, in all of the accounts, but in Matthew's account, verse 16, how they almost like, I don't want to say, I guess, butter up Jesus. Says, teacher, we know you are truthful and teach the way of God in truth and defer to no one, for you are not partial in any way, before they come up and try and trap him.
Yeah, I kind of saw that too, and it kind of makes me think, okay, what do you want?
Yeah.
When somebody comes up and, butters you up that much, it's like, okay, what do you want? If it's your kids, you probably say, okay, how much money do you need? Or what is it you want to do?
Just an additional comment there in Matthew. He says he called them hypocrites, and in the other two accounts he doesn't. But they don't say, "Why are you calling us hypocrites?" I don't think they wanted to know. They knew, but that was pretty harsh. The other two accounts don't say he said that, but in this one it says he called them hypocrites. So if you know you're not, you would at least, why are you calling me a hypocrite? They didn't even go there because they knew they would.
Yeah. And I think Matthew again, because Matthew was actually there and Mark and Luke were not there. They came along to being a Christian later. Yes. Why do I think Herodians got sent? Well, they were kind of a more militant group.
Well, I think, yeah, because that's the Herodians were, I think, followers of Herod. I mean, they thought of Herod's dynasty. I think that's what I read in my research was the Herodians were, what's it say, associated with the Pharisees, assumed supporters of Herod the Great's dynasty. So yeah, they were more on the political side of the thing.
Right. And they were more militant, if you want to call it that. I mean, they were protectors of the realm, so to say. So I think, again, to get that out there, these are the guys that they're wanting to hear so they could take it back to Rome and use that against Christ. Jim, and then we'll
Yeah, those Pharisees and those Herodians, those Sadducees we see in this chapter here is attacking Jesus. The Pharisees would get him, and then the Sadducees come in, and then the Pharisees went in again. Those are some of the most poisonous characters that existed in that time. Not all of them, some of them was honest, but a general run-of-the-mill of them was dishonest. They were seeking the demise of our Lord. And I read that them Pharisees, they hated those Herodians, but they hated Jesus more. And that's why they sent them to him, try to trick him, and where they could take him and kill him,
Right. And this sect of Jews, they're also called Hellenistic Jews as well. So they're Jews most likely from other parts of the world and not from the Jerusalem area. Like was said, they're there to followers of Herod, but as you were saying, Jim, they were more worldly, and I think that's because they were not necessarily maybe from Israel proper. They were Jews, but I think they were from somewhere else in the known world at that time. Yeah, they're there because of the Passover feast, because that the need to come there to Jerusalem for Passover was basically a requirement.
So they were politically minded. There's all kinds of power. There's physical force. There's political power. But just thinking about some of the other accusations that Jesus had against the Pharisees, he said you were robbers of widows' houses. These were not Pharisees that were sticking a gun in the face of old women and saying, "Give me your money." They were using political power to take advantage of property rights or whatever it was. They were not doing so. It was white-collar crime, if you want to call it that. And so Jesus was equating correctly their combining of their religious practice with their political power, pointing out their hypocrisy in using that association for harm against their own people. So they were nasty through and through, and everyone would have been looked at by most of the community as upstanding, good people.
The Pharisees as they align themselves here with the Herodians. And that alignment is precarious because their very name means separatists. And politics makes for strange bedfellows. So here they are, and it's a political question. And the Herodians are political. And the Lord, with what he says, squashes the political controversy. And for the Pharisees, in another verse, they say, well, we've never been in bondage. And it's like, guys, who's your king right now? Because it's not the Lord, it's whose picture's on the coin. It's Caesar. Well, okay, Pharisees, you've aligned yourself with the Herodians, who are obviously political. Now, do you want to go down that road, or do you want to render unto the things? Do you want to render to God the things that are God's? Because you go down this road, and you're moving further and further away from God.
You have? No. Okay. Any other comments? So let's, okay.
I'm a little surprised, I guess, at the fact that they marvel at Jesus' answer. It seems like something that you could pretty much arrive at with a bit of common sense. But it's all part of Jesus' message where he said that he is in the world, but the world doesn't love him because he's not of the world. And this answer is the answer of someone who's not of the world. Taxes, politics, government, it's of no consequence to a citizen of the kingdom. So Jesus says, sure, while you're in the world, that comes with its trappings and its complications. So sure, pay taxes to Caesar, but that doesn't supplant or cover up your duty to God, or it doesn't mean that you're subservient to another king other than God to do that. And so these were people who were defining their allegiance by worldly kings and worldly authority, and they were letting that be their identity. They were associating by who they followed, who they backed, who their guy was, and that wasn't something that a kingdom citizen does. They don't think of it that way. So Jesus' answer surprised them, but it shouldn't be all that surprising for one who's not of the world.
Yes. And basically the Jewish leadership is doing all that they can to try to get rid of Christ. Everything. They're trying every trick in the book that they can possibly do. And basically we'll see the same kind of thing in the next section here, but let's go through the questions then and get to that. What is the primary motive of the Pharisees in this with the tribute money? To entrap him. They wanted to entangle him in his talk. And the question that Jim had asked, who are the Herodians? They're Jews. Hellenistic Jews.
So these are people that you bring the Pharisees and the Herodians together. And it's like John said, politics makes strange bedfellows. Well, Jesus is the enemy to the Pharisees and he's the enemy to the Herodians. So they come together for one purpose, even though they're really have great they're each individual groups that don't agree with each other, but they agree with the trying to destroy Christ.
And maybe the Herodians will get something out of this. I'm not sure, but again, the question that Jim had asked, why are they even here in Jerusalem at this time? And it's because it's a Passover feast, and according to the law, they are supposed to come together as Jews there for that. How does Jesus explain his answer? Anybody.
to bring a coin and say whose face is on the coin. And so if it's Caesar's coin, render to Caesar his toll.
And give to God what's God's. So what is the reaction of Jesus' answers? They're amazed, silence, they marveled, and then what did they do? And then they left, right? John?
I just wanted to mention a lot of times marvel in Scripture, it's not used the same way that we use the word. It's not like they thought this was marvelous. It means they disbelieved. And I think they probably disbelieved because it's very strange for someone, you know, Jesus, who claims to be the Messiah, you know, who's doing all these things, and for him to actually say, give unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. That was not the answer. You know, they're looking for something divisive, and they thought, surely he will not give this answer. And lo and behold, he gives that answer. And they're in disbelief. That's what the word literally means.
So that I completely agree with. And Andrew's response, he was asked a question by a lawyer, so he gave a lawyer's answer. I think their disbelief was this: how did he wiggle himself out of the entrapment that we had laid for him? They were astonished at his political cunning for wiggling out of a question that they knew he couldn't answer. And so that's their marvel is, oh, we worked on that question for days. We talked about that. There's no way you can answer that. And there was. And in the answer he gave, he laid down a perspective on living that's we are in the world, but we're not of the world. And you have to read deeper than the lawyer's take on his answer to understand that Jesus answered correctly.
So
He answered biblically, he answered spiritually, even though they ask a lawyer's question.
So usually when the lawyer asks the question, what kind of an answer do they want back?
Lawyers always want a yes or no answer. And I'm told by the lawyers I know, don't ask the question until you know what the answer is.
Right. And the thing is, this wasn't a yes or no answer. So I think they were marveled. Do you think that these people had seen Christ before? The Hellenistic Jews?
Yeah, the Hellenists they're just the ones that have accepted Roman rule. They're not necessarily a breed of people. They are a political class of people. So they're throughout the society, high and low, but mostly those that think they're going to get some advantage from being allegiance to Rome. So yeah, they've seen Jesus.
So I just wondered if maybe this was some of their first time, if they were coming from other parts of the world, and were expected, you know, coming in there, because Herod really wasn't in the Jerusalem area, although his reign was over that. So I didn't know if maybe some of these folks had never seen Jesus and they expected, you know, something completely different. But I mean, Jesus has been answering this way for years. Right.
But like I say, the aspect of these guys coming in for the Passover is a practical thought too. But like I say, Herodians were probably every place, just like there were Pharisees and
Right.
Sadducees.
Because they came for the purpose to entrap him. And they both had one aim, the Pharisees and the Herodians. They had the one aim, and that was to find something against him.
But I think the Pharisees sent them for a specific reason. Again, this is a political question that they were hoping to get evidence on, saying, oh, we don't have to pay taxes to Rome, then they would use that against him. So I think this is still the Pharisees are plotting all this, but they're using all these factions to get a different angle on things. Gail?
One of the things that, that I thought of in answering this and writing things down, he's separating things of the economy from things of religion. And when you think about what we're doing right now, we are giving to God some allegiance in our obedience to studying his word and following his word. Jesus is saying there are things that belong exclusively to God. But by paying our taxes, that is not any taking away of our allegiance to God himself.
No.
He expects that of us because that's part of the government's laws, and they're not in any way, we're looking for a word and I can't think of it.
So what did God say to Samuel when the people cried out for a king?
Give us a king.
John? And what did he say that what would happen with having a king? Well, he said that your young men will go off to war for the king. He will have your lands. He will have your money. He talks about all the things that happens with the king. Samuel was mad because Israel had rejected God as their king and wanted an earthly king. And God said, yes, give them what they want. Now, does that mean that they couldn't still worship God? Absolutely they could. But now they have to give stuff to the king. And we have the same thing written here, although the king here is not a Jew. Jim?
Yeah, Jesus gave a perfect answer as always. You render to Caesar what belongs to him, because God has told you to, and you render to God what belongs to him. When Jesus paid taxes to a corrupt Roman government, if they misuse those taxes, without sin, the same is true with us. We pay our taxes, if they misuse them, they'll be amenable and not you and I.
But they're not giving God his honor and not giving obedience that's due him.
Right.
Talked
Last
about-
comment.
well, Greg talked about a lawyer. This isn't all that, but when you're going in to try to get something done by somebody else, what do? You go and find out what they're doing, what they're teaching, what they're about. That's what they're doing here. They're seeking out to find what Christ is teaching these people, in case it might do some harm to them, to their pocketbooks, to the way things are run. But if you always seek out the enemy to find out what they're going to do, you do that in war.
Yeah, you try to have as good as intel as you can.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.